Hello everyone, I'm Michael, and today, I'm going to tell you a story. What were the dumbest lies you believed when you were a kid? Story 1. Lost my stuffed animal, a white dog, in the airport in Miami when I was 5. It was my favorite, and I was really sad about it. A few weeks later, my mom presented me with a brown dog that otherwise looked exactly like the white one I'd lost. She said the workers at the airport had found it and mailed it to us, but he got a tan because he was in Florida. Bought it hook, line, and sinker for a few years. Tan dog is now my son's, and he's a big fan. Story 2. I could not understand how all the death scenes in war movies seemed so realistic. So, I asked one of my older brothers how they did it. He proceeded to tell me that they empty out state prisons in the area the movie is being made, dress them up, and give them guns, and tell them that if they survive the filming, then they get to leave jail after. I was told that at around 7, and I believed it till I was around 10. Story 3. My older brother pranked me once. I had watched a kids' TV show, I think it was The Electric Company, that featured a guest star who was a tap dancer. My brother convinced me that tap dancers made their tapping sounds, not with their feet, but with their mouths. I spent the next several weeks trying to tap dance with my mouth noises before my mom made me quit. Story 4. When I was a kid, my dad always told me not to touch it because it was an emergency button. One time when I was like 5, we were flying to visit family and he fell asleep, so I pressed it a bunch because I was curious. Nothing happened, and I fell asleep thinking it must be broken. I woke up in a stroller with my parents upset because the plane had to make an emergency landing, and I started crying because I thought it was my fault. Story 5. Well, my grandpa and I went to forest when I was around 12 years old, and one of my cousins came with us too. He was 16 that time, and told me that a creature lives in the woods which has male and female genital organs. When it is nighttime, it gets out and fucks whatever living thing he grabs. OFC, I didn't believe my cousin. I am not that dumb, but when my grandpa seconds him, I cried like a little baby to go home. Rip grandpa, you crazy old fuck. Story 6. I was in on this lie between my mom and younger sister. My sister was about 5 years old at the time, and my mom convinced her that Benadryl was truth serum. My mom would threaten to give it to my sister if she knew she was lying. It was so hilarious, but my sister seriously believed it and would get upset. Story 7. My dad told me he was colorblind to the extreme when I was 8. The sky is green, the grass is blue. Go was red, stop was green. The ultimate, white people look black and black people look white. My mom made him fix that last statement quick when I asked her, "Mommy, do I look black to you too?" She was livid, but I was so gullible at that age lol. Story 8. My parents convinced us that the person knocking on our door on weekend nights when we were asleep was our Uncle Shiloh stopping to say hello. We don't have an Uncle Shiloh. It was the pizza guy. Story 9. I was 7 years old. One of my teachers wanted us to write a letter to a family member or friend or someone. I wrote the letter. Got the envelope. Got the stamp. My mom had worked at the county jail at the time, and she suggested I write one of the inmates who never got mail. So I did. I wrote something along the lines of, "I'm sorry you're arrested, but I hope you get out." I even signed it with my 7-year-old signature. While I was writing the letter, my mom had left to get to the store. I asked my older brother what our address was because I needed to put a return address. He said, 1600 Pennsylvania Ave, Washington, D.C. 20500. For those that don't know, that's the address to the White House. I wrote it on the letter and put it with the mail my mom was sending out. Mind you, I grew up in Michigan and never left the state, but I wasn't smart. Years later, I went to pick my mom up from work, and one of the COs called me Mr. President, and I asked why he said that. He mentioned the letter I wrote years prior and how it was a joke in the jail anytime my mom mentioned me. Story 10. When I was 6, my parents told me that when you flush from an airplane toilet, the waste gets dumped mid-air into the ocean. I believed that and told all my friends. Parents then told me they were joking, and I became the class fool. Story 11. That if you sit too close to the TV or computer screen, you'll go blind. I was told that during the summer of 5th grade, then got glasses in 6th grade. All I heard was a told you, as I tried on my first pair of glasses and was told that my sister, 1 year younger, won't need glasses because she listened. She got her glasses less than a year later. Story 12. One time when I was 5 to 6, I asked my brother how French fries were made, and he told me they inject mashed potatoes into the skins of the fries with a syringe. I believed that until I saw my mom cooking home fries for breakfast one morning when I was 8. Story 13. My mom rented a never-ending story, and Dad told me if I tried to watch it, I'd have to sit there forever because it never ended. I remember being thankful for my dad's warning and wondering why Mom would do that to me. Story 14. When I was a child, I got upset after a button came off of my shirt. My mother told me not to worry, and that if I placed the button under a rock in the yard, the button fairy would replace it with a quarter. I believed it, and to my mother's dismay, she discovered I had pulled the buttons off of every shirt in my closet. To this day, 40 years later, shirt buttons can still be found under random rocks in my parents' backyard. Story 15. 100% believed that if I left a pile of rocks under this tree outside our house, a fairy would come visit me. My parents told me that so I would go play outside. Edit. Stop saying it's so my parents could smash. They divorced when I was a kid, like 3 years old. But both parents told me that so I believe there were multiple furries. I wasn't old enough to be left outside alone safely. Another edit. Yo, my parents did smash. That's how I happened to exist. They did not live together or were seeing other people at the time they started telling me this. Thank you for ruining the post. Story 16. My granddad would tell me that the buttons switches to turn on the interior lights in his car were actually buttons for ejector seats. I would be scared to go anywhere near them in case I accidentally yeeted myself out of his Ford Focus. He was a funny dude. Story 17. The teachers in my school told us if you pull the fire alarm, ink shoots out on your hands that doesn't wash off for a few days, so they know who pulled it. I was 26 when I found out it's all a lie. Story 18. My mom told me while I was helping mix some batter or something, that if I changed from mixing clockwise to counterclockwise, the ingredients would have mixed. I believed this for way too long and still only mix clockwise. Story 19. My grandpa used to eat weird stuff like Braunschweiger and other weird sausages. My dad told me his dad ate monkey brain sandwiches too. I told that to people for 25 years. Then I said it in front of my dad. He laughed and said he was just kidding. Story 20. That my father wrote The Count of Monte Cristo. He had started the book and loved it so much he would read a part and then retell it to me as if he was the one who had come up with it. When he reached the point that he was at in the book, he would say to be continued while I whined for the rest. This lasted a week and a one-half. Story 21. A college nearby has a cougar as its mascot, and they sell cougar cheese. It's delicious. My uncles told me long ago that it's made from the milk of cougars. Made sense to me. But then I got older, early 20s, and I saw a can of that cougar gold and wondered how they milk the cougars. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. You can't just have a cougar milk farm with angry cougars hooked up to milking machines. It just isn't going to fly. I got a chuckle out of the image and realized that I was a grown man who believed that they were milking cougars down at the college and turning it into cheese. Story 22. As a kid, I was told by my parents the penis was a type of plant when I asked why it grew when I showered. That led to me thinking all kids had those, even girls, up until I was 10 to 11. Story 23. Our neighbor's son has autism, and he had a stuffed alligator that was pink and yellow. He carried it with him everywhere, for years. It would get torn, and they'd repair it. Eventually, the fabric was so thin it just fell apart. They hid it from him and told him that gator had grown up and gone to live with the other gators. He was so inconsolable, they eventually found a slightly larger alligator that was green and gave it to him. They told him that gator had been living in the sewers with his friends, and it turned him green. He finally outgrew the second gator a couple of years later. Story 24. My mom convinced us she had eyes in the back of her head. She could tell us what we were doing in the living room while working in the kitchen facing away from us. We'd test even further by doing the "how many fingers am I holding up" test, and she'd get it right every time. So, all little kid evidence concluded that Mom did in fact have eyes in the back of her head. It wasn't until I was much older that I randomly noticed the crystal clear reflection in the kitchen window my mom could always see. Story 25. One time, I was at my dad's. Parents separated, and him and a friend were hanging outside sipping beers and smoking cigarettes, while I was decapitating dandelions with my sweet-ass plastic ninja sword. My dad never let me have soda when I was a kid. His friend left, and my dad went inside to do dishes. I saw a 7-Up can on the deck table and sprinted towards and took a huge swig. Turns out they had been asking and putting their cig butts in there. I run inside and throw up, and my dad goes, "What happened? What happened?" I lied and said nothing, but he figured it out. So, he told me all the soda he buys taste like that even if they are unopened. I believed him for a few years till I was like 9.